walking virtually along the world's most revered footpaths and connecting the global community of pilgrims. It's the Sacred Steps podcast, available on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Broadcasting from the Shaymare Studios in Florida, here's your host, pilgrim, backpacker, and author, Kevin Donahue.
Buen Camino, pilgrims, and welcome back to the Sacred Steps podcast. I'm Kevin Donahue, and let me just say it is a pleasure to be walking virtually alongside you. On today's episode, my guest is Amazon.com filmmaker Erin Dooley. Erin's story is not altogether uncommon, a pilgrim who finds herself along the Camino. But what really interested me in talking to her is how she used her experiences to empower others to find their own paths to understanding and peace using walks and pilgrimage. Before we begin, I want to say thank you to so many of you for sending your 2022 pilgrimage voicemails via our website. I love hearing from you and where you're planning your next steps. I'll be sharing some of your voice messages on an upcoming podcast episode. So if you haven't recorded your pilgrim voicemail yet, just use your phone, tablet, or computer and visit sacredstepspodcast.com. Click the send voicemail button and record your message. I'll get it right in my email box. For those that have joined our Sacred Steps member access program, just an update, we'll be hosting a series of private live streams and our Ask Me Anything sessions 5 times this year in 2022. I'm also setting up my one-on-one pilgrimage planning Zoom calls with our VIP members. So be looking for those emails in your inbox. If you want to join us for our off-mic conversations or just help support the podcast for really less than a cup of coffee or bottle of water a month, visit the website sacredstepspodcast.com and click membership. Our community is growing, but to make this a special space, our membership seats are limited. So thank you so much for your continued support. Also from the website, an email from our contact page. Marcia from Spain asks, what is your favorite podcast episode? You have to pick one. Buen Camino, Marcia, you predicted exactly what I was going to say. I can't pick one because every episode really has brought me so much closer to our interview guests. Their stories have inspired me to take my next steps and open my eyes and honestly my heart to the greater pilgrim community. So I can't pick just one. One of the most challenging to record was our episode with Father Johannes Schwartz in season 1, episode 10, I believe. Father Johannes has limited connectivity in his hermitage in the Alps, which is understandable, and I wanted to talk with him about his film Via Alpina Sacra and several of his rather epic long-distance pilgrimage walks. The final edit of that episode itself ran for about 70 minutes or so, but I think we sat together talking for a little more than 2 hours. And that's really true of many of the podcasts. I usually spend at least half again the time talking to our guests, sometimes double the runtime of the actual podcast, which can make it challenging to capture the context of our interviews and discussions in the final episode. But it's something that I've really come to enjoy, and especially during this pandemic, it's become a great way to remain connected to you and to our guests and to this pilgrim community. Thanks for that, Marcia. A little deeper than maybe I intended to go, but thank you, truly. Buen Camino, Marcia, and Buen Camino to all of our friends in Spain. At her breaking point following an unexpected divorce, Erin set out to walk the Camino de Santiago. Along the way, she shared her grief and pain with her fellow pilgrims and found new promise and purpose in her steps. Her Camino story is told in the Amazon Prime movie, Way to Forgiveness. Today, Erin is helping others overcome grief and hardship, joining them on walking pilgrimages and discussing healing along the way. Her new series, Walks to Forgive, is available now as a reality-based streaming series on Amazon Prime. Be sure to check the show notes for links for today's discussions and click subscribe on your podcast app or YouTube so that our upcoming episodes are available automatically on your device. The Camino has become a source of strength for so many pilgrims, so I'm excited to talk to Erin Dooley and share her story on today's episode of the Sacred Steps podcast. Erin Dooley, welcome to the Sacred Steps podcast.
Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Erin, I have to say, your story is so compelling to me. I watched your movie, Way to Forgiveness, on Amazon, and I'm so excited to talk to you today because when we get comments, so many people say, the Camino de Santiago created a space for me in which I could find what I needed along the way. And those comments really reflect so much of your Camino experience. Could you share with us what drew you to the Camino de Santiago?
Yeah, like a lot of people, I think I read Paulo Coelho's book, Pilgrimage, and a friend of mine had gone on it 15 years before I went. And so it was sort of in my brain that it would be an interest of mine to go someday. And then when the movie The Way came out, it re-perked my interest, like I think a lot of people. And then I had asked my husband if he would be interested, because you can't, talk somebody into doing the Camino. They have to want to do it. So he was quasi-interested, but he was like, it's all or nothing, and he couldn't take, a month or more off from work. So it got put to the side, and then the marriage ended, and I still want to do this, and I wanted to heal and find forgiveness, and it seemed like a great way to get away from, my home where it was just surrounded by memories, and to work on that. So, and it's something that I always wanted to do. So I made my booking, and it was a couple of months later that I actually got on a plane and went.
You put your backpack on, you got your shoes on, and you went to the Camino de Santiago. Along the way, and again, I don't want to put words in your mouth, it was a really challenging time in your life. Your marriage had just ended, and there were a lot of questions that you set out to answer for yourself.
Yeah. I mean, and it was physically challenging, obviously. And I'm from Illinois, flat as flat can be. And I joke in the movie that my friend and I would go on, sort of quote unquote training hikes, which was mall walking. I literally just would walk around the mall in the morning, sometimes with my backpack, and get some funny looks. And it only occurred to us like a week before I left. I was like, we should probably be taking the stairs to like the second level a few times, because I'm going to be climbing mountains instead of just going on the same floor. So I tried to train, but I was ill prepared for the physical aspect. But yes, of course, the emotional strife sort of matched that. And it seemed to mirror it, the more difficult physical days, it was also like difficult emotional days. And as my body got used to it and it was getting better, my spirit was getting better as well. But yeah, it was a raw time, and people have used that word in reviews on film on Amazon, and I'm like, yep, that's the exact word. I was very raw, and everybody that met me, knew what was happening. And the Camino is such a wonderful place to do that, because people are so open. I've done a few other hikes, and they're so different. Like it's apples and oranges. And so it's really, the Camino is really that place where you're going to meet people that, they're probably not going through exactly what you're going through, but there's an openness of spirit with everybody. And so it was just such a blessing to meet the people that I've met to help me in one of the most difficult times in my life.
In the movie Way to Forgiveness, there are a couple, more than a couple, memorable scenes where you're actually sharing, and we can see a real progression in you. It's real life, so I don't want to call it a character arc, but we really see your progression. The closer you get to Santiago, you have a transition in your perspective where you really start to find a little more acceptance of your circumstance and start to almost wear it as a badge. I was really impressed by that. What, as you're talking to other pilgrims, and there's some commonality in shared stories and things where people are hurting and learning to kind of find that next step in their life. I'm wondering from you, where does the forgiveness piece come from? You reach a point where you're going through this emotional process, and is it like a light switch? Was this a sort of a ramp towards forgiveness that you sort of found along the Camino?
It's interesting because I think I was expecting more of the light switch, but I think it is this gradual arrival where, it's like the whole frog in a boiling pot of water and doesn't know when to jump out almost because, the water just keeps getting hotter and you don't know at what point, but in like a better way that you don't know when it's happened. And then all of a sudden you realize like, oh, wait, I don't have those feelings anymore. I'm not waking up mid thought and, having dreams and all of that. So, but forgiveness was always something that was of interest to me because it is I think it's something that we all should be doing, but it's so difficult. And so it always baffled me. Like when I would hear news stories, and there was one in particular, and this was probably 8 years before I walked the Camino, but a gentleman whose adult daughter was murdered, and he ended up visiting the murderer in prison often, and they formed a relationship almost like father and son, and he ended up speaking at the man's parole hearing, like on his path. And, you can't even understand that level of forgiveness. It's just mind-blowing to be able to do that. And I think that that story really stuck with me. And I was like, if that person found it in himself to forgive, like, then it is possible. We can have that capacity to forgive what a lot of people might be unforgivable. And of course, it's more tragic to lose a child than the end of a marriage, but there's still trauma and all these things. So it was definitely like a goal, I guess. It was like my mission, and maybe other people it wouldn't be, but because that was always in me, it was like I knew that I wanted to do it. And then with my faith, that I was like, how can I, say the Our Father and claim to ask God to forgive me like I'm going to forgive other people if I'm not willing to forgive other people. So I really was very, very motivated to do that. Yeah, it is interesting when I was editing it that it did flow like a movie, like not a documentary, but something that you would write because it just, different things happen, like losing the backpack, like this little side story that and it did. And so I did structure it like that because being a screenwriter, I was like, okay, like if I were to write this, this is the type of beat that needs to happen here. And my life just happened to unfold that way. And then Leah, who's in it, and I have met her at the beginning, and then she had a mission of like how many days, like when she wanted to be in Santiago. And so she was at a faster pace. So I lost touch, but then she ended up getting injured, so I caught back up with her. So she she bookends the movie because she really did bookend my Camino. We then walked with each other for, I think, the last week maybe. And she could see it on my face. She's like, she says it in the movie, when you walked in, like, you were a completely different person. And she's very, like, intuitive, like, can read people really well. So yeah, she really kind of put that mirror up to me to be like, yeah, like, you have made progress. Okay, it's only been like 3 weeks, but you have come a long way. And I think that we sometimes can get so hung up on what the progress we're not making that we forget to see the steps that we do make. Just like on the Camino, you can be like, oh my goodness, I still have 400 miles to walk. And you're like, yeah, but you walked 100 miles. Like, who walks 100 miles? So it really, yeah, there was progress, and I was very glad for it. And it was a big grace to be able to make that progress during that time.
You mentioned Leah, and she's one of the people that you met along the way who, it reminds me that when we are on a pilgrimage, and especially the Camino de Santiago, so often the people that you meet along the way become part of your Camino family. And those bonds, that shared experience, extend well beyond the walk. I'm wondering, do you keep in touch with your Camino family, and are those relationships endured after your movie Way to Forgiveness?
Yeah, some of them. I'm Facebook friends with a lot of them.
Yeah.
And Leah, she actually came to Los Angeles it must have been like a couple months before the pandemic started, I think. No, anyway, she came to LA, and she was preparing to walk the West Highland Way, as was I. And unfortunately, our travel couldn't coincide. We were off by like 2 weeks, and we're like, oh, that would have been so wonderful to be able to reconnect on another long hike. But yeah, she just reached out again to me, last week, and just got me an email. And then David, who's in the film, he and I have seen each other a couple of times. He happened to be in California, and then I actually had a premiere down in Florida for a different film of mine, and he happened to be in Florida, and so he came to that movie screening, that premiere. So that was fun to reconnect, because they do. You can meet people on any vacation, but it's just so different to be on the Camino, and you share and you have these experiences. It's like, the people you meet if you're in the service, those people that you serve with, it's a special bond. And when you go through something that's difficult, it is hard to walk 500 miles. Like, sometimes we say it as if everybody walks 500 miles in a month in their life, and it is a bigger thing. So they do hold a special place in my heart, and I'm so grateful that I met them. And it's interesting because I had changed my flight, my whole thing. I moved it like by 3 weeks after I had initially booked it. And so it's just interesting to think, like, oh, I wonder who I would have met if I had traveled that other time. But I met the people I was supposed to meet.
Planning a Camino de Santiago walk? Stream our Sacred Steps Camino 101 series on YouTube for 5-minute videos designed to answer your questions about your first Camino, including which route to walk, how many days to plan, how much to budget, how to prevent blisters, and more about the Camino de Santiago. Visit the Sacred Steps channel on YouTube to stream our Camino 101 video series. And now, the Sacred Steps podcast continues.
Our guest today is filmmaker Erin Dooley. Her movie, Way to Forgiveness, is on Amazon. Definitely check it out. And as you do, you'll read in the reviews that follow so many who have been touched by those. Erin, you can see those reviews. And so if you enjoy the film, definitely leave a review on Amazon so that Erin can hear your feedback directly. And we'll link Erin's website and the movies in our show notes. So if you're following on Facebook, if you're following on YouTube or your podcast app, click more details and you can follow those links today below. Erin, you've got a great new serial that's out on Amazon Prime where you have taken the empowerment that you gained through walking the Camino de Santiago, and you're sharing these healing footpaths with others in a new series called Walks to Forgive on Amazon. I want to ask you, because these are really gripping, compelling, honest episodes that you're producing in this new serial. And I want to start with just, how do you go about finding your features for the new series Walks to Forgive?
Yeah, I wanted to definitely find very different stories. I had already shared my story about the end of a relationship, and while people could relate to that, no matter what their situation was, I definitely wanted to find different stories. So episodes 2 and 3, I did know that those people. I knew Daniel. He used to live in Los Angeles, and he had shared part of his story, and I thought that would be a very interesting, very different look at forgiveness. So I asked him to be part of it, and he agreed. And then Jen from episode 3, I'm originally from the suburbs of Chicago, and I knew her from my time there, and she was interested in telling her story. And she kind of partially kicked this off because she was really keen to tell her story, and I had wanted to do this series, so it kind of was that last little nudge to tell her story and tell these other stories. And then Belinda, I wanted to have a few more episodes, at least one more, and so I just put on social media. And I had met her like once, I think, before, so we had followed each other on social media. So she saw the post, and it was perfect timing for her because it was right after Father's Day, and her story is about the abuse that her father had suffered at her father's hands, and that was a difficult day for her. And then she saw my post, so she felt like it was, a sign for her to be part of this. And yeah, her story is very gripping, and I was honored that she agreed to tell the story on my show.
Yeah, I have to tell you, in a lot of ways, episode 1 with Belinda was really, I was captivated by it, and I feel really drawn to it because you and Belinda walk a portion of the California Mission Walk, which is a pilgrimage that I have planned for my upcoming book, Sacred Steps. And so when I saw that the two of you were walking the missions with the California Mission Walkers group, I said, I have got to tune into this episode. Belinda's story is not unique because many people have suffered abuse, unfortunately, but her story is certainly her own. And she had such a powerful retelling. Walking with you, she found space to forgive some of what has transpired in her life. What's it like sharing that emotional space with someone and seeing their journey firsthand?
Yeah, that was it was interesting to have that day that we filmed when we were in her apartment and she was sharing her story, and you could just feel like the spirit in the room where like, this was a sacred moment to have her tell this story, because she had not told it fully to even her mother. Like, she was holding this inside of her for 30 years. And I knew in the moment, I could just feel it in the air. And so in the one hand, I'm trying to be empathetic and I'm right there with her. But then my filmmaker brain is going and I'm like, oh my goodness, like, I hope this footage, I hope everything is working technically correct, because I'm never going to get this shot again, because she was so raw in her emotions. And I was like, she may appease me and say it again, but I'm never going to get this raw emotion from her. And so thankfully, like, I was able to work with that footage. And yeah, it just reminded me of, that we really all should bear witness to each other's stories and create those spaces. And not everything is sunshine, and we can't just be those friends that are there for the happy times. That we need to walk alongside and listen to people and give them that time to tell their story. And she is, gosh, she is such a strong woman to go through what she's been through. I mean, it's like she's already lived like enough for 5 lifetimes, and she's a young woman, but she's soldiering on, and she's such an inspiration. And for me, she and I share the common faith, so to see her witness with that aspect was also very much a blessing for me, to see how she relied on her faith and how it deepened her faith. So that was, a gift for me, that I may have given her a gift to be able to have the platform to share her story. But in doing that, and I didn't ever suffer something like that, but it still was a gift for me. So it is, I don't take it lightly, to hear somebody's story, because they are choosing you to walk with them, either literally or figuratively. And for her, she had forgiven already. It was pretty raw, it was pretty fresh, but she had gotten there, and now she was working on the forgiveness or the healing aspect, which are related but very separate. So I was glad to be part of that part, knowing how much the walking helped me to be able to show somebody, like, this might help you. So can I be a part of, the beginning of your healing? Yeah, it's really humbling.
Walks to Forgive is the Amazon series from producer-director Erin Dooley. Erin, I have to say, kudos to you, because having been through pain, you recognize in others the emotional space that they need. But also, I think these are such well done series, because you capture the emotion without victimizing any of your guests, and without making them martyrs to their cause, giving them the space to heal and to share their own personal story without injecting any others. And that has to be incredibly challenging as a producer and a director, because we're dealing with people's, in many instances, their pain, their tragedy, and their hurt. But you're giving them the space to share their forgiveness and their healing, as you said. As others are watching this is a real opportunity to connect with someone who may be going through the same circumstance. Are you getting that feedback from your viewers on Amazon?
Yeah, I mean, people have been encouraging and liking it, and I know Jen, since we are Facebook friends, we know each other. For her, it's an easy way also to help share her story. And if she doesn't want to retell it, she's just like, here, watch this episode. You'll get all the information about me and what my circumstances. So it's funny because she's done that often. I've seen on Facebook. I'm like, I'm glad that it's a tool for her now to help and for people to understand. And some people have reached out to say, hey, if we're going to do more episodes, like, I have a story that I can tell. And they are so varied. Belinda with the abuse, Daniel against the country with feeling pushed out of France, and then Jen with the losing custody of children. Like, they're so different, but they're things that people can relate to. And so, to try to find even other stories that would be universal would be great. It's been encouraging to have people respond to it. And I think at this moment, where we're all maybe with the pandemic, thinking about what we want in our lives, and we're so secluded from each other, and I think it helps us. The one good thing, or one of the good things, maybe, is that we've been able to think and crystallize, okay, what relationships do I want to have, and if there's a problem, like, how can I fix it? And so, if this can help people to be like, oh, I should think about forgiveness, and what does that look like in this relationship dynamic that I have. So. So I hope, I'm just a big cheerleader of forgiveness, a big proponent of it. somebody asked if I was a guru once, and I'm like, man, I still get it wrong. I still can, be upset with people and not, forgive them right away. But I'm a champion of forgiveness. I'll say that.
Erin, one of the things that is consistent throughout the shows, besides clearly the emotional impact that this process can have for people, is that there's a physical space here that is created for people to find and go through their emotional journey. And that's really the walking aspect. Do you find that this disconnect from, the things that surround us give a different space emotionally for others who are looking for healing and forgiveness?
Yeah, I definitely think that going out for a walk, I mean, even, people probably can experience the taste of it, even if they just do like a neighborhood walk, just, if someone in their household is kind of on their nerves or something and they just need to get away and that walking. Because we're physical human beings, right? We're made for motion. And to do that and to have our feet like connect with the earth, and it connects us to the rest of the world and the rest of creation. And there is something that maybe, changes how we talk. And I often say that if we were to have coffee together, we would have probably one type of conversation. But if we were to be walking together, there would be different dynamics. There's something about walking next to somebody and being in nature that really does change the dynamic. And being next to each other and like going towards something in common. I don't know if that is like psychologically, I've read some neuropsychology reports in relation to forgiveness, but because they have had studies of like parents, if you want to talk to your kids, like go for a drive, because if they're not looking at you in the eye and like they don't feel like they're being put on the spot, then they might open up a little bit more. And so I often think of that, like it's got to be related. There's something about you're just more open when you're in nature, and there is something, and you're breathing a little bit clearer. You don't have distractions because you don't have choices. Like the only choice is to think about, or what you're going to think about or talk about. So yeah, it's definitely different than if you were just to sit in your room and be like, okay, I want to forgive. I'm going to sit here until I forgive or something.
We're talking to Erin Dooley about her Amazon series, Walks to Forgive. To find it, all you need to do, well, one, click the show links and you can click directly to it. But if you're hearing this, just go to Amazon and type in Walks to Forgive, and you can stream those episodes directly on your devices. We'll link in the show notes as well Erin's movie, Way to Forgiveness, which is a feature-length documentary about her walk on the Camino de Santiago. Erin, in the brief time we have left, I want to ask you, what are your next steps? We're all facing this global pandemic, and it's confining our physical actions. What are you looking forward to most, either on your future walks or in your production?
Yeah, I mean, I'm blessed to live in California, so I can get outside and still be social. I went on a socially distant hike this morning with somebody, so I can still get outside and do that, and hopefully continue to do more episodes of Walks to Forgive, and continue that and continue telling people stories and working on some of my own scripts, and hopefully can get those into production. And so just trying to keep finding ways to tell stories that might be a little bit different now, given the new sort of world we live in. But to keep trying to create these things in a way that helps people, because no matter what stories I tell, they tend to circle around stories of redemption or forgiveness. I made a Christian musical called Broken Beautiful, and that is definitely all in that same house, forgiveness. And so just going to continue to try to tell those types of stories to try to edify and help people while entertaining, hopefully.
So, Erin, for those who are interested in following the journeys for Way to Forgiveness, Walks to Forgive, what's the best avenue in addition to Amazon that they can reach? And for those who might be overseas as well?
Yeah, my website is entertainmentllc.com, and it has links to those 2 programs, my film, the documentary, other films that I've made, and I just did do subtitles in a bunch of different languages. So A Way to Forgiveness, the feature film, the feature doc, is in 14 different countries right now. So hopefully those overseas listeners will be able to check Amazon and see if it's available in their territory.
Thank you very much, Erin. Thanks for coming on the show today. Thank you for sharing your gift of healing with others and creating the space for those to find forgiveness. I am so glad to have you on the Sacred Steps podcast.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
This has been the Sacred Steps Podcast. Visit sacredstepspodcast.com for episode notes, links, or to contact Kevin. Watch us online on YouTube. We read every comment. Please add your review and feedback. Before you go, tap subscribe to have episodes added to your playlist. Until next time, buen camino.